By the wonders of technology. How about that? Hi there, and welcome to the Good Enough Battle Companies podcast. My name is Chris Piercy from Good Enough Scenery. Special guest today, we have Commi from the Community Edition, live from Maine, New England. How are you doing today? And he's also the man of 1,000 names from across many different internet places. So he's going to give a little introduction to himself as well.
Yeah, I'm doing great, Chris. I'm glad to be here. Folks might know me as Commi from the Middle Earth Discord / MESBG on the invite link. I'm also, if you've seen our posts on Reddit, I am the Commissar. If you took the Commissar and wrote it in orc spelling, that's the other face I have. And then I also am go by Henry. Surprisingly, for some reason, for the past many years, I've gone by that name.
It's almost like it was bestowed upon you at a young age. Crazy.
Yeah.
Right?
My folks filled out my character sheet, and they were like, "Yeah, all right, let's go with that one."
Let's go with, like, we're torn between Commi and Henry. Henry.
Yeah.
I can picture it already. Now, we've had a bit of a chat before going into all of this, and you are a bit of a dab hand, we would say, over here at Tabletop Games. A lot of experience across a lot of different systems, and we currently have the joy of having you kind of leading the Community Edition in for Middle-earth strategy battle game Battle Companies. But I mean, what's your history been in terms of the games that you've played, and how has that shaped how you're looking at Battle Companies now?
Sure. So I first got into the Middle Earth strategy battle game back in the blue book, the one book to rule them all. The big blue one came out in, I think, 2005. Maybe that's 2007. I got introduced to miniature gaming through my family. I was fortunate to have uncles that really enjoyed things like BattleTech or enjoying Dungeons and Dragons, Car Wars, things like that. Some of those might be some recognizable titles for some of you out there. So when I first kind of got into miniature wargaming, I got in first through Lord of the Rings, but then the store representative, of course, then swindled me off to 40K to start my journey, as most Games Workshop enthusiasts are wont to do. Yep. But very quickly, also I was an orc player, just to all my orc boys out there. Yeah, wah. But I really fell in love with smaller scale games. So I played Necromunda with the original rule book, the living rule book, Yak Tribe, the new stuff that's a little weird.
I really want to get Necromunda going, partly because I think there's so much fun scenery to make. Just the idea, I mean, I've got a part of a cupboard that's just got crap in it that I'm like, one day that is going to be part of a foundry which I'll make for Necromunda. But yeah, I'm very much enjoying playing Battle Companies a lot, and as an adult I've only got so much time on my hands. But yeah, Necromunda, and I've often thought about how that could change how Battle Companies is played, but that's probably a whole nother episode. And what
the history of Battle Companies as it relates to Necromunda and Mordheim and Blood Bowl is that is definitely a multi-episode sort of conversation, because it's very interconnected. All of them are siblings to each other in one way or another, and Necromunda itself was a huge influence on the way that I approached battle companies and some of the changes that I wanted to see when we were going through the community edition back, like way back, and then now for this current edition that folks know about today with the Middle Earth strategy battle game, and but Necromunda was kind of where I started with doing some development work, and so that's a huge influence. I also worked on Heralds of Ruin, if anyone remembers that really niche 40K kill team skirmish thing. It kind of was a fever dream. It kind of came in with a bang and then disappeared. I think the modern kill team has.
When I saw that, I was like, yeah, that's the one thing I can just happily admit I want straight over my head. No idea whatsoever. But it's interesting. There must have been a lot of, because of like having been on the Discord for not that long, but just seeing the ideas, and like every day there's a new idea coming from someone. So it's interesting to know what your kind of process is and what your process has been previously on these projects, on how you are able to, I guess, be objective about an idea that's not yours and that comes in from a kind of weird angle, something you kind of completely not expecting, and kind of managing the expectations. Oh, I had this idea and I think it's really good. Why aren't you putting it in there? So what's been the experience of kind of, because it is like the community edition, I think that you're quite humble with regards to goodness, like, oh, this isn't mine, this is the community's kind of joint effort, whilst you're kind of leading it, obviously, because someone has to, right? So how do you kind of manage all of that?
It's so there's a few different sort of modes in which we operate when we're working on the community edition. So I've ended up sort of taking the charge on the community edition because I had worked on a prior Battle Companies community edition during the Hobbit SBG era. That was a revival of like the original 2004 White Dwarf rules, and so all that really means, though, is that I'm the guy who owns a Google Doc, and like that's basically it. I prefer to remind myself that I have no more authority over battle companies and what battle companies means than the next guy. And so when someone has an idea or someone wants to take charge of a project, I'm perfectly happy to just step back, see what happens, and then only really kind of step in when it involves maintaining the soul and philosophy of what makes battle companies, the philosophy and identity of battle companies. Because it's really easy for it to slip into becoming something that it's not really meant to be.
What is it meant to be? What is the soul of battle companies? What does it mean?
Sure. So I'm going to take upon myself to try and define that, which is sort of a nebulous thing. But battle companies, as I understand it, and as we've tried to maintain, is a simple, foremost, a simple, streamlined rules as light as possible system where you take the miniatures off the table that you were previously using for Middle Earth strategy battle game, use them to do a campaign format. So we had somewhere I had posted a mission statement on Reddit that sort of described what that is, but it is the mission statement of the community edition is to maintain as much of the identity of the rules that Games Workshop provided in their now 20-year history of battle companies, and work to only provide quality of life, balancing, and streamlining to things that otherwise did not have the WD-40 applied to them. if we were to take this and rework entirely how units work, for example, and have that you start with a base profile of a fight 3, strength 3, defense 3 guy who levels up and gets all his stat increases to become their own identity. Well, now you've departed from the root of battle companies.
Yeah.
And you've departed from what makes battle companies so great as a financial entry point into the hobby, where the models that you use for battle companies can then be used for the Middle Earth game when you've accrued more miniatures and you're playing the larger scale game. And so it's really important that battle companies doesn't take itself too seriously, because it's just, at the end of the day, like, I will admit, and I'm sure anyone from the community edition that's like helped with it will admit that Battle Companies is a flawed game. And I mean, if you look at Necromunda is a flawed game, but part of the flaws of Necromunda or Blood Bowl are part of its identity. And Battle Companies, I mean, I'm totally biased. I absolutely love Battle Companies, and I play it to an unholy amount. But I have to take off my rose-tinted glasses and recognize where there are flaws and where there are some things that I wish I could fix, and I just can't really fix it right now.
I mean, the thing that springs to mind is, and there's a lot of chat on the Discord, is about how to fix elves, or do you just? And I don't think there's an answer. And I've floated a couple of ideas which I think are great, and people are like, "The hell are you talking about? That's a terrible idea." And I'm like, "But I thought it was really good." But yeah, that's the beauty of the community coming together, is that you need these differences of opinion, and you need to have these disagreements, because hopefully from that is going to come a better answer to the problems and the flaws that are in it. So yeah, it's flawed in a couple of ways, but it's so much fun. And like you said, it's such a good entryway into the. I mean, it's how I got into playing MESBG. And to be honest, I play way more battle companies than MESBG. And what keeps me coming back and what keeps me buying more stuff is that I want to not just start new companies, but I want to evolve them. And the fact that you earn that evolution by playing is great. Rather than just going, "Oh, I've saved up my £30. I'm going to buy this new model. I can now use it instantly." It's going. I remember desperately wanting a Mirkwood Spider for my Dolgador company, and I'm just like, just there every reinforcement roll, like just begging it to get on the special chart. And when it came, it's like the model's been sat there painted for a month. And like my daughters are just like, "So you bought this, you've painted it, and you're not allowed to use it?" "Yeah, that's right." "What?" So, but yeah, the reward that comes from from that, literally earning those influence points. So
yeah. I mean, my first battle company that I put together is I wanted to play. And this was back in 2015, so this predates the Middle Earth strategy battle game era, and I wanted to play Kareth Ungol, which at the time was just the Mordor Battle Company. That's what it was called. You played as Mordor, and so I took some plastic Uruk-hai miniatures that I got from my uncle's collection, and I cut them up and used green stuff to give them more of like full chainmail, and I replaced their shields with orc shields, and I turned them into what I could try and emulate being a Mordor Uruk-hai, and it was really fun then using my personalized army to go out and play test the rules with my play testing group at the time. And I had this one Urukai named Dog Buns, and Dog Buns was the most resilient warrior that ever that ever existed. Never got advancements. I think he died, became a hero because he died, and then that one fate point just was the speed bump to end all speed bumps.
Nice. What I love about that is that you get these characters through playing that end up having a kind of story. So the first company I had was a dwarf company, and I think the first game I ever played was Hold the Line, which, if you don't know, is a obviously. Is a crossing the board scenario with you've got 5-inch movement, and I was playing against my friend's Moria company, and he just kept getting surrounded and kept shielding. So his shield, and if he got priority, he was like, hitting and wrapping to get a little bit, an inch further here. And if he got, won that fight, and then he was just, and he survived. I don't know how many combats, but he didn't have a name at the time, but it just felt like, the classic Leroy Jenkins thing, where just like that kind of level of thing. So he ended up being called Jenkroy as a kind of play on words. And he was one of my sergeants, and my first company, and he fond memories of him. And like, you don't get that with playing 40k. You don't get that with playing MESBG. You don't get that playing the non-RPG thing. It just goes, oh, this is my Aragorn model. This is my Lurtz model. Like, you don't get that. You know their story already, so you don't get to write their story. So that's why I love about Battle Company. So
the closest you can get in Middle Earth strategy battle game is a running gag that some of the folks up here in Maine have when we go to a tournament. There's always that one warrior model that you got to jump off of a building onto someone, and that guy gets a story, and that's about it. Battle Companies is where the true narratives are forged.
And the legend is written as well. So moving on to, like, how many factions haven't you played? That's probably the quicker question.
So by my last count, there were 11 factions that I have yet to put through a campaign. Out of, is that 45 factions now? 44? Oh God, how many are there?
40s.
Yeah,
I know it's in the 40s. So a lot. So we're going to be covering your favorites in a little bit. So, well, I'm not sure if they are your favorites, but the ones you want to talk about. So we've got the Lonely Mountain Alliance and Sharkey's Rogues. But obviously there's some which you've not done at all. What draws you to the factions that you're kind of drawn to? You go, like, next one, it's going to be this one.
So predominantly I play more evil factions than good factions, particularly because the evil factions are a bit more expendable, as they were. There's far less stories told of the band of roving goblins from the desert, or because I had a Moria company that was themed around Dune, actually. And so the head goblin was Lisan Ad-Gaib, and was leading these goblins, which I called the free goblins, basically out of the caves and into Greater Fortune, into the desert. So evil has like a lot of storytelling potential. The units that evil has, there's a lot more room for like rags to riches stories, and that's my hook for a faction, is that if they're basically not elves, not They're not dwarves, right? They're basically just a bunch of farmers who walked off the farm to strike their fortune, and they're gonna die miserably. 2 games in. That's my jam.
So the anti-American dream.
Yeah.
Fascinating.
There's
Yeah,
something about just
indeed.
taking a basic profile and making them good rather than kind of being let's dig on the elves a little more, spoon fed your fight value.
I'm 3,000 years old. There's no fighting move I haven't seen. Therefore, I'm just better than everyone, but still strength
Yeah.
3. I skipped arm day for 3,000 years, but I'm very good with my hand and a half sword. No, I think that's great. I mean, for me, I think initially my friends went, "I bought you some dwarves." I was like, "Oh, thanks." And then I was playing dwarves. And then my next one was Angmar after that because they just seemed Mordor orcs were very easy to get. And from there it's like, oh, there's some cavalry because I hadn't faced cavalry before. I just faced cavalry in a game. It was Osgiliath company against my dwarves, and never faced. All of a sudden, I had like 4 horses charging at me, and I had no idea what to do. I was just like,
Right.
well, I've got 5-inch movement, you've got 10-inch movement, and I don't really know how to do anything about this. And I need to be in several places on the board because it's a multi-objective scenario. So the idea of having Warg Riders, I was like, that's just like the Warg Riders in the films are just awesome.
Yeah.
But yes, for me after that, it was like I was literally just went on the army list and was just like opening at random pages and looking at. I was like, oh, camels, war camels. I want war camels. Oh, Impaler rule. It had, and yeah. So from for a lot of it, it's like, what's a really different or cool unit to be playing with? And like, yeah, I know there's gonna be a downside somewhere along the way, but it's like, what would be cool to play with? I think rule of cool with battle companies is like trumps everything else. I think it's that's my thing. It's like when we played our first map based campaign in my kind of playing group, I had 6 players and 2 of them went with Minas Tirith. I'm like, dude, come on. It's like that's like, I mean, I don't want to. I think I shat on all over them when we did the Minas Tirith episode a few weeks ago. But it's just like that's like going into a bakery and looking at all of the different things that you could possibly eat, all of the different donuts and croissants and pain au chocolat and cream caramel slices and whatever, and going, can I have the cheapest white bread you've got, please? And can you leave it? If you've got any that's been left out, so it's a bit stale, and then I'll take that, please. In my opinion, but they're fine. But it's just like, have some fun.
Minas Tirith is quite literally tin canned bread.
It's tin canned bread that's probably out of date.
Now, I mean, to be fair to our Minas Tirith players out there, you can get some good texture with them. You got to be a little creative with the paths that you take and the equipment section to make them more than just a line of silver.
Yeah, I think that's it as well. Sometimes it's how cool the models look, and the Minas Tirith models, they just look like tin cans. That's not like a painting, but aside from that, right. So, in terms of, I'll stop hating on them now. In terms of like the rules evolving and stuff, what's the sort like? One of the things that I didn't even think about until my friend pointed this out to me is the fact that if you choose a particular model to be a hero and they have got an advancement, then as soon as they're a hero, they can't get that advancement. So there are times when you get that advancement and you're actually, well, you get your potential to upgrade, and you're really hoping you don't get the hero in the making. Whereas normally you think, well, yeah, of course I want another fate point. Whereas other times you really don't want that. So, I mean, is that something that's talked about a lot? I mean, is that among the sort of things that people want to be different? I mean, should there be a choice in the matter?
Yeah, so that is probably the most frequently asked question or comment about battle companies for about its entire life. For the whole 20 years that it's existed, folks have really pondered why does my warrior Ministerius, when he rolls a 6, forego going to the stables so that he can get some plot armor instead? Or, why does my warrior Rohan decide that he's going to take a fate point rather than become a fight 4 bodyguard, defense 6, Rohan Royal Guard? And so there's kind of 2 answers to why this has not yet come to pass. Now, absolutely, if there is anything that I can instill in you and your play group, or the people that are watching this or listening to this on Spotify, is the community edition is just house rules. And I invite you and encourage you and beg you to house rule our house rules, because we're just like 12 or so folks who just happen to be in a Discord together and play games on Tabletop Simulator or meet up and play some games. We're just a bunch of you guys. So since we're part of the rank and file, there's no hierarchy of command. Do what you got to do to make the game fit your needs. As far as why it hasn't been implemented in the community edition as even an optional rule, is that there is a disparity between some factions that involve promotions. So some factions have either not as good promotions as other factions, or some factions don't even get a promotion. And so when you have a system where half of the die results are promotion, rather than 2 out of 3, that just 16% increase on promotions ends up having a huge impact on a campaign during the long run. Because let's take like Warg Riders, for example, or even Lake Town. I mean, Lake Town technically have a promotion. It's more of a side grade where they become less brave but fight better. But you have like these factions where like they don't promote. When they're in a campaign pit against, say, Minas Tirith, where you got a bunch of dudes becoming knights, or you're playing against Rohan, or a bunch of dudes are getting horses and become Rohan Royal Guard on a 4 or 5. If you make that a 6, it puts the pressure on those less fortunate companies a bit more. And so by having that 6 be a forced entry into herohood, right, into being a hero, it is 2 things. It's meaning that the companies without promotions aren't missing out on even more because they don't have that choice. It's also narratively, this person made their name as what they are. So this warrior of Rohan, peasant, made a name for themselves while they were still a peasant, and rather than when they joined the ranks of the royal guard or became a royal knight. And so there's a lot of storytelling potential, some creative devices built into that, which ends up being a convenient excuse to not have it implemented.
Yeah, I really like that. That if you think, obviously, I wasn't around in the Middle Ages, but you'd imagine that there were sometimes people like, there was a brave warrior. It's like, yeah, you're this knight now. It's like, oh, I don't really want to be a knight. Well, you're a knight now, so like they didn't have to roll a dice for it, but they, the powers that be, the leader decided, yep, you're my right hand man now. And I guess that the thing is that unless it's a special rule that you get from your upgrade, like getting bodyguard for being a royal guard, then becoming a hero doesn't mean that you miss out on the opportunity to advance your stats. So you might not get to a particular special rule that you want. Oh, boo-hoo! You still get to improve your stats. So,
yeah, and that Rohan example, that Rohan peasant, should that peasant decide, hey, I didn't vote for you, and want to get a horse and heavy armor, well, there's a system for that. Yeah, there's the armory, there's the equipment section. You can turn that warrior of Rohan into the thing that they want to be. Just by they might be taxed a few points of rating, but in the end, the rating ends up being a drop in the bucket anyways. It's you'd have to have a full company of warriors of Rohan who all became heroes, bought horses and heavy armor for all of that rating to really pile on and make a difference. And if the focus is too much on also like that optimization of the rating of the character or how fast they progress, then you're losing a little bit of sight of kind of the scope of what Battle Companies is capable of. We try to make it possible to have competitive events. And so that's what the rules have been, trying to aim towards or have in mind. But at its core, it's still a narrative, device. It's a narrative storytelling tool where you happen to roll dice and have guys running around the board, and that peasant maybe gets hit by a stray throwing spear and dies.
Ultimately, you're playing a game where dice define what happens. So you've got to take the rough with the smooth, as they say.
Right.
So for the biggest part of my Battle Companies playing time, it's been very much just playing pickup games. So starting up a company, playing a game against someone, and just saying, oh, what companies have you brought with you? Oh, you brought these ones, I brought these ones, and just kind of matching them up. I have played a few campaigns, but for those people who've only kind of just played pickup games or not had the group to kind of get together, like what does a Battle Companies campaign system? I mean, speaking about the campaign edition coming out, but what is a campaign? Just to kind of set that one up for you.
So, a Battle Companies campaign, in simplest terms, is just a linking of a link of games that are connected to each other, have an impact on each other, would be the simplest definition. So if you have those pickup games where you meet at the local club, you have brought the company you had from last week, and you play against someone who had their company from last week, you, believe it or not, are in a campaign. Now, there are some structured forms of campaigns that one might decide to pursue. And an example of that might be Games Workshop's defined campaigns that they have in their current 2019 rulebook. You have the narrative campaigns, which take you on a loose story. The one presented in the book is telling the story of a company that goes to the Blue Mountains, beats up a drake, and takes its treasure. And along the way, you just play against your fellow opponents. But there are certain milestone scenarios where you don't play against another battle company. You play against a narrative force, as we kind of call it, an NPC army that represents some location or task that the company had to some adversity they had to overcome in order to get to that final scenario. But also there's other forms too. There's map campaigns where you have your company is claiming territory on the map of Middle Earth, and it's more of a game about controlling land and fighting over to take over other people's land, and a winner is decided by who has the most land at the end or some point system. But ultimately, a campaign is whatever your group makes of it, and can be as complicated or as simple as you like. We have a campaign supplement that's going to be coming out this year for the 20th anniversary of Battle Companies, and that's going to outline a few different ways you can play. Two of which that I've been working on are completely different than what you will have experienced playing Battle Companies. Normally, you have your company, and it's yours, and that company's yours alone. Well, we have a couple formats being introduced in the supplement that are going to provide some more collaborative experience, or are going to provide some more high power level play of your battle companies. And so if you want to see, like, oh, I wish all of my guys were heroes, well, tune in. Or if you want to, maybe you're in a position where, like, you don't have some miniatures of your own and you want to get into the hobby, and there's someone who's nice enough to share with you. There's going to be a company of players where multiple people are controlling at least one miniature of the company, and they're going to be playing against a rotating everyone in that pod will be playing through a campaign together against narrative forces, and that narrative, the evil player, as it's being talked about right now, but it's not really alignment coded. I'm just calling it the evil player. So the evil player is actually one of the players of the group, and their models or their character just isn't there that session, or maybe it is, depending on how you want to run it. But they might not be there because the person who's controls that model is now running the opposing force, and they're trying to beat their allies while their allies are trying to beat them. And there's a reward if you can play as the NPC force and beat your friends up. Then your guys get more XP. And the narrative reasoning is that the forces of evil have prevailed, right? Your good company has struggled and they've fallen, and so on the fifth dawn of the fifth day, you look to the east, and there is the person who was previously controlling the evil force. His miniatures come in and they're buffed. And they're now here to save the day for whoever ends up running the next scenario. And it's just a useful way to kind of have a drink or some pretzels or what have you with some friends and tell a story together, which is sometimes appealing to folks.
It's a different way of dressing it up, and why wouldn't you want that? And the thing is, it's like you said, anything, it's all this optional. No one's saying, oh, you have to play it this way. It was like, well, the different ways of playing it that come out are just fantastic. You can just go, well, actually, I don't want to play it this way. I want to play. Oh, there's a new way. Had no idea. And here it is. So, yeah, I mean, sounds fantastic. I'm really excited about the. Is it July? You thinking?
Yeah, I think July is a safe date. We wouldn't want to make like every video game development company out there, topical, and release too soon. So, and since July, at least as far as the United States understands, July is the official 20th anniversary of Battle Companies. As far as it being released in the US, I don't know if 294 July White Dwarf is the same month that the English copy, which was, I think, 1 or 2 numbers off, that was at the same month that both nations got Battle Companies. But as far as I understand, and until proven otherwise, that's when Battle Company started, was July 2004.
I reckon that even if you're wrong, no one's going to hunt you down, so you're all right.
Let's go.
Sorry, you got it wrong. The number was wrong. Right, where does he live? Let's send some people after him.
Got to go to Maine and find him.
Yeah, he's somewhere in Maine. It can't be that big. probably as big as the whole of England. Right. So let's move on to your chosen companies. So we've got the Lonely Mountain Alliance for your good company, and we've got
Mhm.
Shark Rogues for your evil company. Now I'm going to give you the choice here, given as you're here right now. Now Stephen insists that I always do the introductions in the voices. Sean Bean and Gollum. Would you like it as Sean Bean for the good and Gollum for the evil, or should I just read it normally? I'm free choice.
I want. Maybe this is a. Oh, I mean, I gotta love Gollum, but I want Sean Bean for both of them.
Okay. Well, my voice box thanks you. Right. Okay. Give me a second. You bastard. Mordor. I have to do the line.
Yeah.
Walled up in his kingdom, Thorin is approached once more by Bard, Franduil, and a glittering host of Mirkwood elves who, thanks to Bilbo, now possess Arkenstone. Planning to use the duel of Thorin's house as a bargaining piece, Bard once more confronts Thorin in an attempt to make the belligerent dwarf honour his word. Yet Thorin will not relent, believing this is to be a ruse made by his perceived enemies. Standing defiantly atop of the gates of Erebor, Thorin hears the sound of iron-shod boots marching in unison towards his gates. The arrival of Dane only exacerbates the situation, provoking Fanduel and starting a battle between the elves and dwarves that sees casualties on both sides. As dwarves and elves clash blade and axe, the armies of Azog burst forth from the ground, uniting these unlikely allies together in order to prevent the mountain from falling into the hands of the enemy. As dwarves, elves, and men set aside their differences in the face of the armies of the Pale Orc, the battle for the mountain begins. You bastard.
Oh man, that took me right back to playing Civilization with Sean Bean's intros to H Civ.
I think that you're overestimating how good my Sean Bean impression is, but thank you. Yeah, so this is before we dive into the ins and outs of this company and the stat lines and everything. I mean, this is purely a community edition creation, right? I mean, it's something that you guys just came up with. So, what was how did this come about? Because it's one of the most themey companies in the community edition. So, yeah, tell me about that.
Yeah, so this this was a company that followed shortly after the assault on Pelennor faction, which the assault on Pelennor is just the evil side of the siege of Gondor and the battle with the Rohirrim, and so is another one of those multi-faction ones. And a member of the community actually brought this forward. They go by the name of wow. So as not to get it wrong, I'm pretty sure it was Blowthorn. All right, Blowthorn. If it wasn't you, I just gave you credit. Whoever brought it forward.
You're gonna get hunted down again, mate.
I'm going to get hunted down. But Blowthorn was a member of, actually, he had been part of the playtesting crew since 2018. And a couple years ago, or actually last year, maybe 2 years, he came up with the idea for representing the Battle of Five Armies. And wanted to represent an alliance of men, elves, and dwarves to kind of mirror the Last Alliance faction, where the Last Alliance is the Last Alliance of men and elves. This is like the next, alliance sort of thing, and it was just a great idea, and we took it, we ran with it. We talked about crazy special rules that kind of break the mold of a lot of other factions and how their special rules work. And we really just wanted to have it just dripping with a theme. so that when you're playing this, you can feel like you're reliving moments of the movies with your battle company.
So with that in mind, do you want to introduce us to what you get in your starting battle company?
Yeah, of course. So when you start a Lonely Mountain Alliance battle company, you start off with an Iron Hills dwarf who's just by himself. You get one Iron Hills dwarf, and that guy is equipped with the coolest Iron Hills dwarf weapon, and that's the Matic. Then you've got one Mirkwood elf who is equipped with an elf bow, and then you've got two Lake Town militia with shield, two Lake Town militia with spear, and one Lake Town militia with bow to round out your archery contingent of your starting force.
Yeah, it's a nice mix of stuff, and we'll kind of dive into exactly stat lines and what all those weapons mean and what those guys all do. I'm going to talk about the reinforcement roll. So it's going to cost you 3 influence to roll. So a 1 will get you nothing. A roll of a 2 to 4 will give you a Lake Town militia with choice of war gear, which is nice to kind of have that spread and get the choice of war gear rather than it being a 2 is this, a 3 is this, a 4 is this. Because I think with some companies that can be it's a frustration, but then's the breaks. 5 is a Mirkwood elf with choice of war gear, and 6 is an Iron Hills dwarf with choice of war gear. And they have some unique war gear in the Elven Maid Glaive, which will cost you 1 influence point. And all heroes will gain the Lake Town special rule. And yeah, tell us about the company hero upgrades, because these obviously, like you said, breaking the mold. These aren't, as far as I'm aware, especially not with the elf one, these aren't ones which have been plucked from any of the particular rule books or add-ons. They're just ones that that sounds cool.
Yeah.
From the film.
So the first company special rule that you had touched on is that all heroes gain the Lake Town keyword, which is really important for the Lake Town militia stat line, because they get a bonus if there is a Lake Town hero nearby. And so to represent that union of men, elf, and dwarf, at least temporarily, they get to be benefited by an elf or a dwarf nearby rather than relying on a Lake Town hero. And then for the company hero upgrades that you can take in replacement of a special rule on your advancement chart, we have 3 special rules, 1 for each species of character. So you've got 1 for the dwarf, 1 for the elf, and 1 for men. Starting with the hero of Esgaroth, which is for the Lake Town miniatures. Inspired by others' bravery, they charge into the fray with renewed fervor. So this is taking from Hilda Bianca's special rule, where the hero gains a bonus of +1 to wound when they charge that turn. So rather than Hilda Bianca's aura that gives a bunch of people +1 to wound when they charge, this is as if they are one of those guys that is charging behind Hilda. And so they just get it by themselves, which is really useful in a company where you have elves and dwarves represented. A way for the Lake Town profile to really shine is important. And having that +1 to wound, basically a lance on the ground, does a whole lot for the strength 3 Lake Town guy, or even strength 4 with an axe. You pierce, go to strength 4, then with the +1 to wound, you're basically strength 6 when you think about it. And it's huge.
Yeah, that's not to be overlooked. That isn't. So yeah, wow.
And then as we become a little bit more fair, and fair as in beautiful, we have the elf rule, Shield Vault. With agility beyond measure, the elves effortlessly traverse the battle lines, whether for valor or just for flair. And this special rule, I'll read how the rule works and then kind of explain the inspiration. But this special rule reads, the hero may move through friendly models armed with a shield as if it were open ground, as long as they have enough movement to not overlap any bases at the end. So If you remember from the Battle of Five Armies movie, there's that one scene where all of the dwarves line up and make this really durable shield wall. And then all of the elves behind them jump over so that they can fight all the orcs and not have the safety of the shield wall. Well, that made it into battle companies. It's got a bit of a niche use because you got to have a bunch of shields. But if you do, you can surprise folks with an elf that can run on top of all those shields and charge someone where they didn't expect it. So a shield wall versus shield wall clash when you've got your line of troops, even just like 3 troops in a bottleneck or 2 in a bottleneck, you can then send your elf behind who is like maybe holding an elven glaive and then run them from spear support position over the top of a guy and cause a trap on the guy you're fighting, which can really change the tide because traps win games. Number one tip to winning a game of Battle Company or a game of Middle Earth is trap their models because then they will die.
Yeah, it's rare that someone, particularly a basic bitch warrior, survives if they get trapped. I mean, it happens, and sometimes it happens multiple times in a row, but more often than not, it's traps, double your strikes or to wound rolls. So
yeah, and if you've got
backstabbers or something like that, then even more so. So yeah, I mean that's a really just fun special rule, just something that's really just different. And then you got the dwarf one, which I mean, tell me about how this one came out, because it's a bit of it's niche.
Yeah, so the dwarven special rule is in the nick of time. And it's the dwarf only special rule. When their allies need them the most, the dwarves of the Iron Hills always arrive sooner than expected. So the hero may add +1 or -1 to the maelstrom table, which is used in a few scenarios. If they are alive and on the battlefield, they may apply this to the rest of the company. So basically, in a few scenarios, you have to roll to see if your guys come on, or you have to roll to see where they come on. And what this guy can do is go first and use that +1 -1 as a free point of might to then get to where you want to go, and then everybody else after him then gets to add +1 -1 to their roll. So you can really funnel all of your battle company into one cohesive unit, take advantage of your shield vault rule, be able to take advantage of the Lake Town militia benefiting from a Lake Town hero, which can be a dwarf or an elf in this company, and really just solidify that safety in numbers, because a lot of your company is going to end up being Lake Town militia just based on how the odds are. And so being able to make sure that they can work together as a cohesive unit is going to be really important. It also is in there because the Iron Hills dwarf itself is not lacking in ability, as a model. And so we didn't want to add a special rule that just made the guy even more killy, or made the guy, a monster of might efficiency, for example, by giving them like Master of Battle or something. So this rule felt safe.
There's a reason that it's the number 6 thing on the reinforcement chart. That, I mean, it's better than an elf, by these stats. Whether it is on its own, they're pretty closely matched up. But yeah, I think giving them something tactical rather than buffy. I just thought of Buffy, which completely set me off on a tangent, rather than something that buffs them. That's what I'll say instead. I think absolutely solid. Okay, so right, no advancements. Yeah, no advancements at all in this company. But because of the community rules, it does mean that the models that don't have an advancement, if they roll for a promotion, they don't get hero in the making, then they do get an uncapped amount of extra courage. That's correct.
Yeah, they can just keep stacking on courage, which is helpful for I mean, even the Lake Town guys, if they became a hero, they can, if they were able to hit Courage 5 before they become a hero, that's 2 rolls on the advancement paths for most of them that you now don't have to roll. And it doesn't even add to their rating. So it can be a really useful tool when you don't have promotions to get those courage increases.
Yeah, I think that's a nice little rule. So let's go through the stat line. So we'll take it in turns on this. So
Yep.
starting with the Iron Hill Dwarf, they naturally come with heavy armor, sword, and shield, and they have the additional options of a mattock, crossbow, or and spear. Stat line is pretty tasty with movement of 5, as with all dwarfs. Fight 4 with a 4+ for shooting. Strength 4, defense 7, 1 attack, 1 wound, courage 4.
Yeah.
They are strong, they are hard to kill, and they're courageous. But apart from that, they're terrible.
they especially because they come stock with the shield, which when you roll the choice of war gear, just as a public safety announcement, it generally means that you're conforming to whatever the box creates. So in this case, it's generally going to be a guy with a shield, or a guy with a mattock, or a guy with a crossbow, or a guy with a spear and shield. That's just a general rule of thumb across all of the battle companies that give you a choice of war gear. But the fact that this guy is strength 4 and defense 7, he's getting wounded on 6s by strength 4 guys, and he's wounding the defense 6 guys on 5s. So he's able to take a punishment and dish it out.
Yeah, so I'm shortly going to be doing a battle companies campaign where I'm playing as Moria against Stephen, who's going to be Iron Hills.
Oh no!
So my one hope is that I just at one point get to buy myself a cave troll, pick up a goat, and throw it at some other goats. And if that happens, then I won't care so much about the 96 games I lost that led to that point. But anyway, so let's talk about the mattock, because that's not a weapon that appears in any other company as far as I can think off the top of my head.
Yeah, the mattock is a unique weapon for the Iron Hills. It's similar to the pick hammer that the Grim Hammers have in the Army of Thror. Or Erebor and Dale, if you're speaking in battle companies terms. And it's a 2-handed weapon. So it comes with that pro and con of being able to hit really hard at the cost of maybe not winning the fight. So more of something that you use either when you're burly, or you've got a bunch of friends backing you up with their dice. Or if you know that you're not going to die because you're an Iron Hills dwarf. But you can use it to bash. And if I recall, you can use it to piercing strike as well. So you can take that strength 4 Iron Hills dwarf, piercing strike, hit strength 5. Since it's a 2-handed weapon, right? You're now adding another effective strength 2. So you're now effectively strength 7 and wounding just a defense 7 guy on 4s. With strength 5 from the piercing strike against defense 3. Well, what would have been a 3+ is now a 2+ to wound.
That's my huge roll of 1.
Yeah, just don't roll 1 or take a path that lets you re-roll 1s to wound. And suddenly that mattock is basically auto kill or like auto wounding what it hits. With just a basic dude. It's really good.
That's just disgusting. Moving on to the Mirkwood Elf.
Mm-hmm.
Tell us about them.
Yeah, so this is one of those elf characters. The Mirkwood Elf is your pretty standard, I guess, now in Middle Earth strategy battle game. It's movement 6, fight 5, shoot 3+, strength 3, defense 5 until you add the shield, then it's 6. Attacks 1, wounds 1, courage 5, and the Mirkwood Elf as baseline comes with heavy armor, which is what's giving it that defense 5, an elven made hand and a half sword, which is an elven made weapon that can also two-hand, turning their strength 3 from a shortcoming into not as much of a problem when you're swinging your sword with two hands to slay some goblin or what have you. And can feint too, which elves are one of the few factions that can really take advantage of the feint special strike, because as soon as they have one buddy with them who's providing their fight value of 5, every other guy can now just feint for free, basically, and still win the fight on a 6. They're now rerolling 1s. So when you've got some elf two-handing their sword, get that +1 to wound, and they're feinting, so they're rerolling 1s to wound. A 3+ rerolling 1s, that's good.
That'll do.
That'll do just nice. Yeah, they're very efficient miniatures to have in your force, and that's part of the reason why they're only a 1 in 6 chance to get on the reinforcement table. They're another one of the elite members of the crew, and you can equip them with an elf bow, so you get that strength 3 shooting, or if they're a hero, you give them a crossbow from the Iron Hills, and now you've got a 3+ shoot value, strength 4 crossbow. And if you also give them the elf bow, it gets worse or better for them, right? You've got a strength 3 bow that you can shoot if you move 3 inches. If you stand still, you shoot the crossbow, and now it's strength 4.
Oh, that's just dirty.
Oh, they become a pretty good Swiss Army knife in this faction.
Yeah, and then they've got the elven made glaive as well, which, if I remember rightly, that is a spear that you can shield with.
Yeah, it's a spear that's also an elven made hand and a half sword, basically, and also allows you to shield. So if you did not want to buy a shield for your guy because they're an archer, you give them elven made glaive, suddenly your crossbow, elf bow toting, turret can shield to protect itself. And that means if it's Path of the Ranger, and you've got 2 attacks, +1 because you're outnumbered from the Brawler special rule. You've got 3 attacks. Then you shield. You've got 6 attacks, and you're already a fight 5 elf. And the elven glaive, because you're shielding and it's elven made, when you're shielding, you're benefiting from the elven made special rule. So you're rolling 6 dice to stay alive, winning ties on a 3-up against other fight 5 dudes.
And you say this is one of your favorites. I wonder why.
Well, it's not for the elves, let me tell you. But they are useful in this faction. They're extremely useful when you kit them out to, kit one out to be your basically your gunman, your Clint Eastwood of the spaghetti western, to just stroll into town and save all the Lake Town militia.
Okay, speaking of which, let's go through their stat line. So Lake Town militia, they come as standard with armor and either a sword or an axe. They can have bows, shields, and spears. And their stat line reads as follows: movement 6, a fight value of only 2 with 4+ for shooting, strength 3, defense 4, 1 attack, 1 wound, and a courage of 3. So they are a slightly better goblin with longer legs.
Yeah, that's a pretty good summary of them. A brave goblin with long legs. These are going to end up becoming your rank and file troops in this, and because this isn't a company that's about the elves and the dwarves necessarily. It's about all 3 of them, and the Lake Town militia ends up being a very efficient profile because they're only 5 points, which is insane. They pay the same points as a goblin, and you kind of have someone who's better. And they can take the axe to hit strength 4. So you're almost never really taking the sword because you just want to have those strength 4 models to really bash through the opponent. If you're, of course, trying to optimize your Lake Town guys, you want to take that shield. so that you're defense 5, so that a strength 2 arrow is not hitting you. They have the option for a bow and a spear. The spears are probably favorite piece of war gear because they just stand behind someone that's better than them and provide that extra die to just siphon off some XP. Until eventually you've got, a bunch of Lake Town militia who are now becoming heroes and gaining their skills, getting +1 to wound on the charge, and really defining why they deserve to be the bread and butter of this faction.
Yeah, I can. Obviously, I've got no experience of playing either as them or against them. So, not sure. No, in terms of optimizing this company, we'll go into like the hero paths you go down, but in terms of like optimizing it to work well, how is it best to kind of put these guys together? Given the choices that you've got in front of you.
Yeah. So if you're looking to really like optimize your company for whatever motives that you have, generally you're going to want to take that starting company that it provides you, so that you're maximizing the number of models that you have. Because technically, when you make the custom selection force, you're playing at a deficit of points, because some of the starting companies will reach a bit higher than a custom selection because by nature they are the default choice, and custom selection has the advantage of decision making. And if you're trying to optimize the force to be the most competitive experience, you're going to want to have either the elf or the dwarf as your leader. The dwarf is the most resilient, so since there are some scenarios out there where defeating a certain leader is important, having a defense 7 dwarf be your leader can be very handy. And since he's strength 4, he can level up quickly because he's wounding defense 6 guys on 5s. And if you're optimizing as well, you probably want to either A, send him down Path of the Warrior so that he can get the burly special rule, or you ditch the Matic and get him a shield. So that you've got that defense 7 as early as possible to stay alive. And then your elf, the other easy choice for optimization is you send them down either sharpshooter or ranger, so that you can have a really either you're shooting 2 crossbow shots a turn, or you're shooting 1 crossbow shot that hits really, really hard, a lot farther than anyone else can. With the 30-inch shot, arcing shot that you can get. And then for the Lake Town militia, you're gonna be looking for axes and spears to support your 2 strongest models, and they're gonna be taking a lot more of the support paths. So you're probably gonna have like a sorcerer Lake Town militia. You're probably gonna have a passive defender Lake Town militia, maybe a martyr. But as far as like, without I guess getting any deeper into the paths, if you're looking to optimize their growth, you want a rallying horn as soon as possible, because then the rallying horn lets you do the thing that we might not be in the spirit of this specific faction, of skipping the Lake Town guys as much as possible, to get your elves and your dwarves quickly, so then they can level up early in the campaign, so that they become the behemoths that your opponents don't want to play against, sooner rather than later. But with a limited pool of options, it's really important to be a little crafty with the equipment section and the war gear. Note that if you look at the faction page, the unique war gear Elven Made Glaive is not elf only.
Yeah, that's what I was going to ask about, because me and my friend Dave, who I've mentioned on the podcast a few times, have had kind of discussions about this sort of thing. And yeah, just because it's elven made doesn't mean that only an elf can carry it. So yeah, it feels. So we had this discussion about Wanderers in the Wild, I think, and whether a hobbit could take an elf bow, and we eventually decided that it couldn't, just because it felt too big for it. and he wouldn't be able to fire. But we did say it could have a dwarf bow. That makes a lot more sense. It'd be the Hobbit equivalent of having a longbow in terms of size. But before an elf bow, they're like 6 feet high.
Yeah.
So the Elven Glaive, you can just give that to one of your Lake Town militia guys, and he can shield, he can spear, he can whatever.
It can be really useful. And I mean, of course, if there's a lore reason that you don't want a certain unit taking a certain item, absolutely, we love that. But if you're trying to like optimize this gaming experience to punish people at the gaming club, if you give your Pass of the Sorcerer Lake Town Militia guy, or just any Lake Town Militia guy, and of course they have to be a hero to unlock this because warriors have to obey their own rules. But if you give your Lake Town Militia hero an Elven Maid Glaive, when they eventually grow up to be a big boy and have fight 5 or fight 6, well, the Elven Maid special rules can be great. And even if they don't get there because they're a sorcerer or a minstrel or what have you, being able to give the Elven Maid special rule via spear support to your Iron Hills dwarf models or any other model can be really huge. It even turns, if you're playing this company against Moria, if you have 2 Lake Town Militia, one has an Elven Maid Glaive spear supporting, fighting another goblin in their spear support, well, you're both fight 2. You're now winning that duel tie on a 3+ because you've got a plucky hero with an Elven Maid Glaive. It's a more of a tech choice to hand out the Elven Maid Glaive. And the reason why it's not elf only in this is that it kind of is a nod to Bilbo and Sting. Because Bilbo's running around with an Elven Maid dagger. And so this is kind of, it's a loose grab at that sort of notion. And it's, maybe even represents that an elf died and this Lake Town guy picked it up, right?
Yeah, I mean, I'm happy with that. I think so. The way that you're talking about them, obviously you got the fight 2, which is, I mean, is that the biggest disadvantage, that you're going to have a lot of fight 2 guys, or are there other disadvantages which I'm overlooking?
There's 2 large disadvantages to this company. One is that most of your guys will be fight 2, which can be overcome by the fact that you just throw them in a fight with any other elite unit, and now they're benefiting from that guy's fight value. As we'll talk about later, with Sharkey's rogues, it turns out that you are if you can move 6 inches and you're strength 3, you can still be pretty good. Just being able to surround folks, get those traps, get those kills, have someone with fight value really pulling the team along. And the other disadvantage is that you don't have cavalry.
Yeah.
So cav factions can run you down, and they can squish those Lake Town Militia pretty quickly. So it's going to be important to, especially in those missions where you deploy all around the place and it's random, that you have that Iron Hills dwarf with that maelstrom bonus to keep your little ducklings into one little group so that they're not just running off on their own and dying. But even still, one Lake Town Militia fighting a fight 5 elf, they still win the fight, just under half the time, right? Like fight 2 doesn't matter if they don't roll a 6. And so one Lake Town Militia with an axe can be terrifying for any model that just doesn't roll that 6.
Yeah. And I guess if you know that you're going into that fight, you might as well be doing a piercing strike, because, if you're going to lose it, you might as well lose it with the chance of destroying it if you do win. So, yeah, it doesn't matter if you're fight 2, 3, or 4. If you're in fight 5, it's pretty meaningless. So, what would you rate this company out of 10? I'm not sure if you listened to the previous episodes or not, but we've been kind of rating. Where would you put this company? Given that you're a guy that likes playing evil companies normally, you hate elves.
Yeah, so this company immediately loses like, at least a point and a half because it's got an elf on the roster. So on that alone, it's not a 10 out of 10. But on theme, I think that this smashes in at no lower than a 7.5 out of 10, probably closer to 10 out of 10. Like this is hardcore theme at its finest. As far as ease of play, this probably is a bit closer to maybe a 6 or a 7. It's not hard to make the elf go do things and make the dwarf go do things. It's just kind of understanding the limitations that the Lake Town Militia have, and then knowing how to just not care about that, and throw them in to destroy stuff. And as far as its overall power level compared to other companies, I'd say that with 10 being Iron Hills and Elves, and 1 being, I guess 1 is Sharkey's Rogues. I would say that this probably falls comfortably around like a 6.
Yeah. So what would you give it as an overall return?
Overall, I think that boils down to about like a solid 6.5 to 7.
Yeah, I can see that. I mean, I think that the way I see them falling down is when you are put in a scenario where there are multiple things going on.
Mhm.
So there's multiple light objects to pick up. There's multiple objectives to hold. Dwarf and some lake towns go over there. Elf and some lake towns go over there. But if you need a third group, it's gonna have to be some numbers, but you're all fight 2. So that's when once you split up, that's when the difficulty seems to lie with it. So I think because of that, I like the theminess. I like the advantages you're talking about that you can kind of try and garner from it. So I'm going to go with a 6. I mean, they're not. It's got Iron Hills and it's got elves in it, so they're always going to be competitive.
Yeah.
The theminess is cool. The fight too, not so much. But yeah, I'm happy with giving them a 6.
Yeah, that's a fair number, honestly. Some factions will just out defense these guys, and so that's a good call on that 6.
Yeah. Which moves us on to Sharkey's Rogues, which are not going to out defense them. So interesting that you've given them a rating of like 1 out of 10 in terms of how hard they hit. Yet they are apparently one of your favorites. So nice backwards thinking there. And right, so I'm going to give you the option. Sharkey's Rogues. Would you like the introduction read as Sean Bean or Gollum?
Oh, Sean Bean.
Sean Bean again. And what I like about Sharkey's Rogues, we'll get into that afterwards. You bastard. Mordor. Warm up. Following his army's defeat at Helm's Deep and his subsequent banishment from Isengard, Saruman secretly made his way out west to the Shire under the guise of an old withered man with the name of Sharkey. Here he set about gathering ruffians and wild men to him, hatching a scheme to take control of the Shire and the halflings that lived there as vengeance for the defeat that the travellers had brought upon him. After plotting and buying his way into control over the Shire, Sharkey assumed full command under the name of the Chief and sent bands of ruffians across the Shire and surrounding lands to spread his will. Some of these groups of ruffians and wild men would often venture a bit further than instructed to bully local villagers, especially if there was some extra money to be had. You bastard. I'm all done for poor South Yorkshire accents for the day, which is good because I don't have to do another one. So yeah, I mean, Sharkey's Rogues is an interesting company because I mean, for people who have only watched the films, the scouring of the Shire from the books is completely, missing from the films, apart from a vision of that Sam has or something. But in the books, basically, Saruman gets his knickers in a twist about the fact that he got kicked out of his tower, and he just goes and like kills a loads of hobbits because he can, and because he's being a bit of a dick. That's about that's the short version.
Yeah,
That's the blurb. So
it's an act of spite. That's all it is.
they're like, oh, hobbits! I'm going to kill like 27 of them. I think it is. So
Yeah.
that's what it's all about. So, what do you get in this horrible starting battle company?
So in the Sharkey's Rogues, you start off with the most powerful miniatures of all of Middle Earth. You start off with a total of, do I read? That's right, 6 ruffians, all right? And 3 wild men of Dunland. The ruffians, you have 2 of them with bow, 2 of them with whip. And the wild men of Dunland, one of those 3 was fortunate enough to bring his 2-handed axe from home to lay waste to the forces of good and evil alike.
Yeah, I mean, with the hobbits that I spoke to Val about, I think by the end of it, I was fairly convinced. They had me counting how many hobbit models I had. You're gonna do well to convince me on this because.
Oh, I'm ready.
And you know what? I believe you, and I genuinely believe that I will see things a bit differently because there are some things to be spoken about here. Let's talk about the reinforcements, and straight off the bat, it is only 2 influence points, which means even if you lose a game and you have someone permadeath, you can unless you're unlucky enough to roll a 1, then you get that model back again. So yeah, a 1 will get you nothing. A 2 or 3 will get you a ruffian with choice of war gear. What a joy! A 4 will get you a wildman of Dunland with choice of war gear. A 5 will get you 2 ruffians with choice of war gear. And hold your hats, hold your horses, hold everything else, because a 6 will give you an orc warrior. I mean, the very fact that the top thing is the most basic bitch orc warrior, like, so that's what you get in terms of that. Do you want to talk about the company hero upgrade and special rules?
Sure. So the as of the overarching special rule for Sharkey's Rogues, they are not limited to just 15 models in their company. In fact, a Sharkey's Rogues battle company may have up to 20 models rather than 15.
So you get 5 extra terrible models.
5 more walking experience points is correct.
Yeah.
But then, all right, now here's a little bit where the gas starts to come in. All right, this is a little bit of the grease lightning here. So Sharkey's Rogues have a company hero upgrade called Strength in Numbers. The hero is no more than a bully and is in their element when fighting with the odds in their favor. If the hero is involved in a fight where there are more friendly models than enemy models, the hero gains a bonus of +1 when rolling to wound.
Yeah. I mean, I can see that they're gonna have +1 to wound more often than not. So, but that's 1 model. Okay. And there are advancements. So a ruffian can upgrade to be a rogue, which means that it gets extra fight value and better shooting. Okay. So before we dive into that, because we'll get Go on. Tell me about the standard ruffian stats and starting stuff.
Yes, the legendary ruffian, heralded for its battle prowess, is a is a movement 6, fight 2, shoot value 5+, strength 3, defense 3, attacks 1, wounds 1, and a hefty courage of 2.
I just heard you say the number 1 12 times or something. Might as well have been.
And to a ruffian goes into battle not unprepared. They go into battle with not this fancy elaborate armor or heavy armor. They don't carry a sword or a spear or even an axe. A ruffian comes out of his hovel with either a knife or a club.
Solid.
And I should know, the club and the knife aren't too bad. The knife lets you do the stab special strike because you'll never get to feint in this game. You are, in fact, a fight 2 model. But you can stab, which is really great if you want your guys to die so that the scenario ends faster while you're holding all the objectives. And then the club is really useful because you know all those pesky elves that are walking about with their fight 5 and this and that. Well, the club can do the stun special strike, where if you win a fight, you can roll a d6, and on a 5+, you reduce them down to, I think it's fight value 1, attacks 1. And something like that elf is got lower fight value than you do with your hefty fight 2.
So what you're telling me is that ruffians are straight up hero slayers.
Yeah, straight up. You just get like 10 of these guys to jump onto one elf hero. And, they might be winning on 6s because that elf is defense 6. Ho, ho, ho. It's double the odds of just reducing them to fight 2. I'm sorry, fight 1 even, attacks 1. So you can win the next round of combat against that elf. What's that elf going to do?
Yeah,
kill you?
Yeah, it's a nice dream, but the whip, we don't see that anywhere else. That's basically a throwing weapon, isn't it?
Yeah. So you could take the bow with your shoot value of 5+. All right, whatever. The whip, though, you're looking at a 2-inch range, strength 2. Maybe 1 actually. Strength 2-inch range, strength 1 throwing weapon that also can give you the whirl special strike. This is basically the can I just roll a quick 5+ into a 6 and kill your guy? Item. It costs 1 point on your guy. It'll only ever be one point when it's on a guy. And in fact, your whole reinforcement chart, you have pretty easy access to just getting whips. And you can just force a lot of tough choices when it comes to heroic moves. They're not going to kill something in every game. You might kill one guy with a whip in every game, but if one of your 20 whips kills one 10-point model, or even 2 10-point models, they've at least made half their points back, which is not bad. And the fact that it's basically free because you just have to charge someone and you whip them. And then if you don't kill them, well, now you mob them with like 6 other guys and they'll maybe kill them. It's a very swingy item, but I take them on all of them. You got to have the whip. It's why you're playing Sharkey's Rogues in the first place. If for no other reason that I'll get into later, it's a potential alpha strike. And being able to whirl to have one ruffian roll to 6 and no one else does, and deal a strength 3 hit to every enemy model that he's engaged with, can be pretty sweet. You turn that one attack ruffian now into potentially killing 5 models. Sign me up.
I mean, it's the sort of thing that Battle Companies just is made for in terms of, yeah. Do you remember when Ted like had his whip and he killed those 3 elves that were surrounding him? Yeah, that's why we call him Whippy Ted.
Yeah.
Ted the Whip, Ted the Whipster.
Ted, yeah. Ted will be in your Sharky's Rogues company. If you ever encounter one, there will be a Ted who is going to kill someone with a lucky whip crack. It's so good.
Yeah, I mean, it sounds like a lot of fun. It just also sounds horribly unlikely to. I mean, you play enough games, it's going to happen. I mean,
Right.
it has to. Yeah.
And the moment that you kill someone with a whip, that box of metal Sharky's Rogues that you just bought paid for itself.
Yeah.
You know that $50, well spent.
Yeah, just for that one single moment where the odds decided to lean in our favor for once, and yeah, I mean, I'll be honest, they sound like terrible fun. They sound like the sort of like sound horribly depressing. Apart from every now and again, you get that chink of light. Um, but and then you got Wildman of Dunland, which are mildly better. So they come with a sword or axe. They didn't bother to put a shirt on. They didn't worry about putting on any leather armor. They just came out, you know, with and as I walked out the door, they went sword or axe, and you know, eventually decided on one. They can get a two-handed axe. They have a special rule which is hatred of Rohan, which hatred is +1 to wounds.
Yep.
Any model with the Rohan keyword, which is very handy if you're playing Rohan, funnily enough. And stat line, movement 6, a hefty fight 3, 4+ to shoot, strength 3, defense 3, 1 attack, 1 wound, and courage of 3. So yeah, that's really average. But I can see that with axes, you've got piercing strike. Two-handed axes, you've got double-handed and piercing strike, so you can get up to +4 with +1 to wounds. So yeah, realized that missed out on the ruffian special rule atom lads, which I haven't got the rule book, also the army list in front of me, but if I remember correctly, that's to do with hobbits and specifically fighting hobbits.
Yeah. So if you find yourself in a campaign where someone has learned lessons from Val's episode previously in the Shire, and you really want to take the counter pick army, you pick Sharky's Rogues, because with Atom Lads, you get to add +1 to your fight value when you're fighting against hobbits. So your ruffians go from fight 2 to a legendary fight 3 to just really put on the hurt to those hobbits. And then there's also, I think it's in the same special rule, they have the option to just shove a hobbit into a bag.
Yeah.
And paralyzes them.
Yeah, and if I remember correctly, the roll to get that is you have to get higher than the hobbit's strength.
Yeah, which is like what, 2?
So on a 3+, you paralyze hobbits.
Yeah.
I mean, rough. I mean, I can see why that's the ultimate counter pick, that you beat them on fight value and you can potentially paralyze them. A 2 in 3 chance of paralysis, which is going to mean that either they just get killed or their friends are going to get tied up trying to unparalyze them. Which, yeah, dirty. So, and then the orc warrior. Tell us about that incredible stat line that we
Mm-hmm. So this is the elite of the elite of the Chiefs army, sporting your standard movement 6, fight 3, so already better than a ruffian. Shoot value 5+, but you're not shooting with these guys. Strength 3, all right, but defense 4, 5 because they can take a shield. Suddenly these guys become a little less vulnerable to small arms fire, specifically strength 2 bows. You're looking at your tanks here. And to go with it, of course, you can't have more than 1 attack and 1 wound. They are a basic warrior after all. And they can't be too brave either, so they're courage 2. It really balances out their stat line. But the charm of the Orc Warrior is that they come with that armor for defense 4. They can pick a sword or a pick, which you're generally taking that pick to have basically a strength 4 orc. And then they can choose a bow, shield, spear, or 2-handed weapon. Now, if I may, I'm going to explain why the Orc Warrior is the coolest entry to have in this list while still having the ruffians being the star of the show. The Orc Warrior is a unique profile in the Middle-earth strategy battle game where they have the most variety of war gear that they can purchase. They can order 4 items: a bow, a shield, a spear, and a 2-handed weapon, which can be a 2-handed maul, a 2-handed axe, or a 2-handed club, I think. So you have access to a lot of special strikes from those 2-handed weapons, and you have a lot of customization from the shield, spear, and bow. And what I really like about Sharkey's rogues, so we'll talk about how to make them good, all right? We'll talk about how to make them good. But why I like Sharkey's rogues and why they are my favorite company of all time is that they are literally the rags to riches story. You have a basic profile, strength 3, defense 3, movement 6, right? You literally have the blank piece of paper. And you then get to draw your picture and write your character onto that canvas. And so with the Orc Warrior, even if you don't have one in the company, your heroes, your hero ruffians, your hero wildmen of Dunland can take shields, take spears, take 2-handed maces and mauls and clubs, and become this ragtag band. We're talking about Sean Bean earlier. Think Sharp's rifles. You've got this ragtag crew of people who have different walks of life and are trying to make the best of it in this fantasy world. And that storytelling is so appealing to me. And then the other appealing factor is taking Sharkey's rogues and beating up another company with them, because with your superior numbers, their movement 6, you can play the positioning game to overwhelm them. And with that special rule where you have, if you get your heroes the +1 to wound with by outnumbering someone, your standard ruffian is now striking at effectively strength 5.
Yeah.
And that's pretty strong. That's wounding defense 7 on 5s.
Yeah. I mean, it goes back to what you were saying earlier about how, a lot of people want the game to just be, or people have previously wanted RPG games to be like that blank sheet of paper. And I can see why having the most basic bitch profile imaginable with terrible defense, average strength, just terrible fight value. But it being, that's your starting point. That's where that's level 1 in your Fallout campaign. It's just like, okay, where do we start? We start here and we go against a bloke or whatever. It's right. Okay. So I like the fact that essentially your heroes have access to every weapon in the game that's not, company specific.
Every basic weapon, yeah.
Yeah. So not crossbows, not longbows, but in terms of just standard kind of weapons. Yeah, can have any one of them. So what? I mean, for me, I'm just very tempted to go, well, I want to get my heroes to be as good as they can as quickly as possible.
Mm-hmm.
So my temptation would be that the wildmen become your heroes, but I'm guessing that you do the exact opposite.
So let's see. Let me take a peek back at that starting company list. That really good starting company. Uh, yeah. So with 6 ruffians and the 3 wildmen. So generally, yeah, you will more often than not be taking the wildmen of Dunland as your heroes. They've got that hatred of Rohan, which is helpful if you ever have a Rohan model that you're fighting. But it leaves room for the ruffians to hit fight 3, shoot 4+ for free by rolling a 5 or a 6 or a 4 or 5 on the warrior promotion chart. Which is the profile that they used to have. They actually got nerfed like over the past 2 editions. They used to be fight 3, shoot 4 up. And so this is just bringing them back to their heyday when they were your stock archer for Isengard armies or for evil armies. There was no factions. It was just good and evil. And you would take ruffian bowmen. So history lesson there. But generally, yeah, you're taking the Wildmen of Dunland as your 3 heroes. Maybe a ruffian with bow is one of them, so that you can have an archer right off the bat. But generally, you could just buy a bow for Wildmen of Dunland because they shoot better than your ruffians. And it is most advisable anyway to have the Wildmen of Dunland be your first bet. Now, if you're like me and the campaigns that you run, you like to use the optional rule of the what is it? The minimum characteristic rating threshold, I believe is what it's called in the community edition rules. There is a certain profile that for each stat that you are under it by, you don't increase your rating when you advance until you have matched that rating or match that profile. So if you're a fight 2 ruffian and you get a fight increase, you don't pay for the fight 2 to fight 3 improvement when using this optional rule. It's not until you're paying to get to fight 4 that you're now acting like any other model. So the ruffians can keep their rating value low while they're growing, and get a lot of against the odds bonuses because they're just in Blood Bowl terms. And the other host, the name escapes me, who plays Blood Bowl would know. They're kind of like the stunty team of of battle companies.
Yeah. I haven't played Blood Bowl for a while, but I get the reference. Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, so what hero paths are we? I mean, presumably, it makes sense off the bat for Wildman of Dunland with a 2-handed axe to go down the path of the warrior to get Burly as soon as possible because he wants someone to have some killing power because it's going to be your free +1 to wound, and then combined with the company hero upgrade +2 to wound, and if you piercing strike, we're up to like +9 to wound, something like that. I don't know, the maths escape. Outside of, that seems like the obvious pick, whether that's leader or whether that's sergeant. It's neither here nor there, really. What other paths? What other paths are you leaning towards?
Yeah. So generally, like across the board, you have the easy answer of saying warrior, ranger in general, or warrior duelist in general. But because of the stat disadvantage that you start off with the ruffians, it can behoove you to explore other paths. So some paths have some certain choices that the ruffians can immediately take advantage of. So having your leader, or at least one of your heroes, be Path of the Skirmisher,
Hmm.
or any other path that gets the fearless special rule instead of a courage increase, can be really important because then that guy babysits all of your courage 2 models so that they don't flee when your force breaks. And so having a skirmisher also means that you get access to heroic defense, which means you can not have to worry as much about having such a low defense because now everyone's winning you on a natural 6 anyways. You get the throwing weapons for going Path of Skirmisher, which is something that your company doesn't have access to. And there's going to be kind of a pattern that paths that give you something that your company doesn't have access to is really good for these lower tier companies.
Yeah.
Um, you're being able to get the free shield from Path of the Defender is huge for these guys. And suddenly you've got a guy who's only wounded on 6s, who's walking around, and infantry that are next to him are only wounded on 6s by archers. That Path of Defender is going to be really important, and a ruffian can do that job. You don't need to be fight 3 to be a Path of the Defender. And then you've got Path of the Watchman. You get so much, such a toolbox by having that watchdog and having the sound the alarm and having access to those heroic marches and the moves that unit can make. That you're playing more Calvin ball than your opponent. You're trying to beat them not because your profiles are better, because you are man to man taking them down. You're winning because you're scrappy, and you are not another company that people are used to.
Yeah.
You're taking manacles from the equipment section, and so taking Path of the Defender, Path of even the Martyr where you can get a lot of might points, and it wants to die. And then you don't get penalized for it dying. Like, it can be really big on such a cheap model that can run in, basically be a hand grenade that you toss at the enemy to do some damage while the rest of your guys meet them, on the other flank and surround and trap them. And you've got all these guys who are getting stacking bonuses to wound and stacking this just as much killing power as possible. So while Path of the Warrior, Duelist, Ranger, and General are solid picks, and you should take a General in this path, because that +1 influence, if for nothing else, the +1 influence in the banner, are and the leadership courage increase and being able to help other heroes with your stand fast is so important on a low courage company. But those are the paths I would suggest. Are ones that give you tools to play with. A sorcerer. I as a reference, for you non-believers out there that don't believe that a ruffian, or rather, I guess in this case a wild man of Dunland, can hit to great heights of strength. In my Sharkey's Rogue company, I had my leader Duran. Uh, Ended up by the end of the campaign being a fight 4, shoot 4+, still strength 3. Sure, only defense 5 because they're wearing the armor from that the orc unlocks. They get the ability to upgrade their armor by 1. They got the shield, so he could hit defense 6 if he gets a defense upgrade. But he was a 3 attack, 2 wound, 3 might Path of the General, and he was a banner. So with just 3 attacks, and by being a banner, he has technically a 4th attack when you think about it, because you're rerolling one of those to win the fight. He's putting so much dice pressure onto the opponent that even if they're fight 5, if they only have 1 or 2 attacks, the math breaks down that this guy can still win, about half the fights, maybe more, because they just have more dice to fish for that 6.
Yeah.
And the elf does not, or the dwarf or what have you, does not have that as much dice because all of his friends are preoccupied with the other 20 ruffians that you have. That, you can really force companies out of their comfort zone, and it's all about that toolbox. It's all about turning them into their own heroes, making your own Strider, making your own Boromir, just by nature of the items you give them, the paths you take them down, and just outplaying your opponent.
So what you're saying is that a Sharky's Rogues company has got probably more tools available to it than most other companies, and that gives you the tapestry to really kind of weave a story about the individual characters better than other companies that have less access to kind of a variety of weapons. And I can see now why you put the Orc Warrior in there, because it provides more stuff for you to do. And also, if I'm understanding right, you should almost always use a special strike, because if you die, then you don't care, because ruffians are so cheap to replace anyway.
Yeah, generally, like maybe don't stab because you kill yourself like almost half the time. But I mean, your defense 3, especially like piercing strike, they're gonna roll a 6 to wound you anyways. So what's the difference if your defense 1? If it means that you're killing them, then great, because you can afford to lose one ruffian, to their one Gondorian even, because your ruffian is half the cost basically. And the and you can really cement the numbers advantage on your opponent and the economic advantage if you take the rallying horn, because you can basically most of the time skip the bottom half of the reinforcement chart, and your 2 influence is now getting you. And what I did with my company, I got a few orcs, so I had some fight 3 spears, but I skipped anything that wasn't 2 ruffians with whips, because for 2 influence, I'm getting 2 models. That is only a couple other factions can say the same, and that's the Shire and Goblin Town, kind of.
Yeah.
And so being able to have that model efficiency and throw the lives of your dudes away to be the stunty team that just like kicks the teeth in of the good models of the other side, so that next time around they've got a bloody nose, and if gods can bleed, then the ruffians can take them down.
So give me a rating out of 10 for Sharkey's rogues. You gave them a 1 out of 10 in terms of hitting power, but in terms of like playability and fun and all of the other things that you marked the previous company on, how are you rating them?
Yeah, so with no surprise, I mean, maybe 1 is a little harsh, but there's got to be a 1 in a scale of 1 to 10 system anyways. If you're rating things a 1 to 10 and you don't have a 1, then you don't really have a 1 to 10 rating scale. So we will put the ruffians at 1, because they if you don't know how to play them, their viability just falls apart. You got to be more of an experienced player. It's actually a really good choice if you have someone who always wins their games because they're really wizard at battle companies. This is actually similar to the Shire, is a good choice for them to play, so that less experienced players who are playing average or better companies can now have a what feels like a more enriching and even play experience. But 1 on the power scale. On theme scale, if you're playing Sharky's Rogues, you're playing it for theme. So it's really hard not to give them a 10 here. They do exactly what they're. I mean, most factions fit their theme, but ruffians I push to 10 when they might otherwise be like an 8 or a 7 because of the storytelling power you have with them. Because they are rags to riches story, their narrative strength is a 10. And then as far as ease of learning,
Yeah, they're never going to be the company you choose first off, straight off the bats. Very first company you ever play MESBG with.
yeah, it's you gotta have a specific mindset. You have to be okay with your miniatures losing to play a faction like this. So they're great for those orc players out there, those 40k orc players. This is the faction, if you want to be the good guy that everyone loves. Yeah, so my last piece of advice, make sure that every single one of those models has a name, and it has like 1 to 2 sentences of a backstory, so that you can remind your opponent that when they kill your ruffian on the field of battle, you can tell the story of John Deere, who worked the farms tirelessly every day, oiled the pitchfork, was studious, did community service, and then was just ruthlessly stabbed in the chest by your dwarf warrior who just wanted another XP.
Yeah, I love that. I mean, my friend's got some 3D printed models for his Sharky's Rogues companies. One of them's got a bottle that he's drinking from. That's the kind of the dynamic action that he's taking, and that guy is going to be called Drinky Pete. So he's going to be fun.
And if you kill Drinky Pete in that campaign with your camels, I don't know, man. How are you going to lose sleep with yourself?
Are you going to be the one to tell his wife that you killed him?
Right. They always talk about wound damage, but what about conscious damage?
What about emotional damage?
You have the moral high ground every time you play as the ruffians.
So, final question: who is the company you'd least like to come up against if you're playing as Sharky's Rogues?
The company that you would least want to come up against would be, generally speaking, anything with strength 3 shooting. Similar to the hobbits, they will just die in droves. Your greatest weakness, though, is not necessarily the dwarves or the elves or even the cavalry. Your greatest weakness is either Corsairs of Umbar, who all come with throwing daggers, or your greatest weakness are probably the Paths of the Druidin or Defenders of Helm's Deep, with the amount of throwing spears and blowpipes and stuff that they have. So you want to watch out for those three. Paths of the Druidin, which is another faction I actually quite enjoy. Defenders of Helm's Deep, and the Corsairs of Umbar.
I was thinking they'd be pretty weak against terror-causing armies.
Yes, Minas Morgul is going to be terrifying. That's just a fact of life.
Dol Guldur as well, with spiders and wargs and hunter orcs.
The one saving grace you have against the hunter orcs, which yes, demolish you, and Minas Morgul with their terror-causing Black Numenorians, are that for them to get that value, either A, their Black Numenorians need to cause terror to have you not get in combat, which means the Black Numenorians might not be in combat. It's a little bit sketchy on how you play against that, but they only have like orcs hanging out with them, so you can take on the orcs. The thing with the hunter orcs is for the hunter orcs to get their value, they have to be in combat. And if you're a faction like ruffians who die to shooting, the opportunity to be in combat against just a fight 3 hunter orc means that with one wild man or one orc spear, you match that hunter orc. If their 2 dice don't carry the day, then you've got your 2 ruffians who are just ripping them apart.
Yeah, to be honest, I'm really excited to play against them. There's definitely going to be some fun stories told, some nice rivalries created, and some wives who are going to have to be told that their husbands are dead, I guess.
They're just the pure heart. Besides the Shire, they're like the pure hearts battle company.
They absolutely are. And thank you very much for joining us for this episode of the Good Enough Battle Companies podcast. My name is Chris Piercy from Good Enough Scenery. And if you want your scenery to be wonderful or even just good enough, then head to goodenoughscenery.com where there are modular tiles available so that I can build you a board in whatever style you like with as many variations as you could possibly dream of. So, yeah, I'll catch you for another episode soon. Oh, and a big thanks to Henry or Commi or De Commissar from the community edition, who is a wealth of knowledge on the subject and a good man on top of that. So go and join the Discord, join the chats that are going on, and contribute by just simply playing the rules, which are available in the description of this podcast. Catch you for another episode soon.